evening. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you to the first Leading Voices in Public Health lecture for this academic year. And I'm really excited to introduce our speaker this evening, Dr. Chris Reddy. He's a senior scientist at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. His name was given to me by a colleague at Eastman, and when I first thought about reaching out to him, I thought, well, there's no way he's going to accept our invitation. He's probably the world's expert on oil spills, an expert on nanoparticles, biofuels, plastics. If that wasn't intimidating enough, he discovered he has almost 200 publications, 8 patents, testified before Congress 5 times, has a TED Talk, and he's an all-American wrestler. However, he immediately reached back out to us, agreed to come here, and then we faced this challenge. What do we have someone who's that broad and experienced talk about? And as I talked to him, I realized that this idea of communicating science is probably more important now than at any time in recent history. And so I'm really pleased and honored to welcome Dr. Chris Reddy.
All righty. So, thank you so much for inviting me here. I've only been here for half a day. It's been fantastic. I was down at Valley Brook with Randy and just totally blown away with the work that you're doing with your students. And I kind of wish I could come back here as an undergrad because I would love to make my own bricks and things like that. But I'm just going to jump right in. I'm going to move relatively quickly, I hope, and not let my Rhode Island accent slip out too much. So let's put on our seat belts and let's go for a really fun ride. I hope I don't stall. Let's see how we do. Okay, so, oh, I got to get my talk up. Okay. That's good. Okay. So I want to give you a full screen. I'm not a Mac PC person. All right. Is that better? No. We might need help in a second. Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. Full screen, where is that? Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, let's hope that was the biggest hiccup. All right, so anyways, I'm really lucky. I've had a lot of fun doing a wide variety of different science topics. I've studied plastics on and off throughout my career, a lot of oil spills. For a while, I spent a lot of time thinking about soot or the material that comes out of your tailpipe or when you burn wood at home. Looked for a long time about how you might make a new product like carbon nanotubes and how you can avoid having a big disaster. And I did my PhD on what happens when you build roads with recycled automobile tires and their environmental impact. And I know it sounds crazy, but on the side, I'm just launching a personal care product business based on algae for making lipstick and sunscreen. So, but we can't talk about that today. I'm sorry, but it's a really fun project. So I won the life lottery, and you can't underscore that point to a lot of people because at least for me, I'm the lucky ones. I have this wonderful family. I have friends. I have mentors. I have this group of fairy godfathers and godmothers throughout my whole career who've always seemed to be looking out for me. It's kind of like a warm fleece blanket. I've always been taken care of. And I guess I'm lucky because of that. And I always show a picture of my family when I give talks. And there's a couple reasons. One, it shows that I'm not a complete idiot, like that at least somebody loves me. So that's one. Two, I love to show off how beautiful they are. And so that's my wife, Bryce, my son, Willie, my little daughter, Ellie, and my yellow lab, who Ellie likes to dress up, and he's fine with it. But I'm showing this slide for two other reasons. I'll talk about one later. But the next one is a lot of scientists, when they go to national meetings or wherever, they feel compelled and should to acknowledge in their talks who funded their research. And they may also acknowledge their colleagues or the folks in their lab groups as well. They never acknowledge their family. And I can pretty much assure you that I am a significantly better scientist because I have a backbone of support that's outside of science, that gives me a sense of perception, and that gives me a sense of grounding. And it's also a buffer on both the good and bad days. And so I think we always have to remember how grateful we should have for family and what they play our role in our lives, whatever we do. And so I always do this. I always want to make sure that I show my family because of that. They don't mix chemicals for me, but they mix a lot more. But I'm totally not perfect. I'm gonna just start a laundry list of problems that I have. I can be a jerk, or I can kind of be funny in a self-deprecating way. I prefer the latter. I have this rather Rhode Island accent that I try to put myself on about a 2-second delay. And I have about 5 words that I don't use because they're just not very good. I'm not very good at making eye contact. I don't know why. I never had any trauma as a child or anything like that, but I talk too fast. Surprisingly, I think I know more than everybody else on a certain topic. I can get a little combative. My dad once lovingly told me that if you weren't such a nice guy, you'd be a jerk. And then he once told me, and I really love my dad too, and he once told me that I was like bringing a wolf to a poodle show. And and my mother told my wife that be careful with him, he moves fast. And my mother was trying to be funny, my wife didn't understand that. But the other issue that I have at stake, amongst all those confidence that, I think I'm smarter than you and I'm combative, is that I suffer terribly from imposter syndrome. I took 2 plane rides down, and the whole ride I'm going, why are these people flying me down here, right? Why am I here? And it's almost like a yin and yang, right? You think you're, I think I'm the best, and then suddenly you start to say, oh my God, I'm going to bomb tonight. And it's good in some respects. You can't let it. It's a good governor for your ego, and so I suffer from it. But it's okay. The most important thing from what I've been showing you so far is to give you a sense of knowing me and understanding what I'm about. And I'm going to a little bit more about this because I think it's critical to one of my overarching themes of this talk. It's funny. I was excited to come here. I thought it was going to be a really great school. And then I went out to Valley Brook and was just totally blown away with what's going on. And, I have a very special kinship to public schools. And a lot of them that are kind of unsung heroes. But they're the ones who, we celebrate the wrong heroes in society. And it's the teachers and the students that come out of schools that really bring our society forward, and like Easton, Tennessee. And so I'm really excited to be here, and I was even more excited after going to Valley Brook. I am a product of K through PhD from Rhode Island Public Schools, and I show this slide at every talk I give to underscore how grateful I am that public schooling gave to me. And I can name every teacher except for my undergrad, and that's because I was an undergrad, and I don't think I have to explain anymore. So, but it's this. I want to talk about these 2 little things: BS in chemistry and PhD in oceanography. So somebody once in a while will ask me, what do you do for a living? And sometimes I'll say I'm a chemist. And if you say you're a chemist, their nose crinkles, they smell a little, and then they say, I hated my 11th grade chemistry teacher. If you tell them you're a scientist, a straight up scientist, you don't give them anything else, they kind of look not quite sure what to do next and what to ask, and then they might ask, and then I might elaborate, and that doesn't go too well either. But if you tell them you're an oceanographer, it's like mad street cred. It's the most fantastic thing. Oh my gosh. Have you ever swam with dolphins? No. Well, no. Do you scuba dive? No. You know, if you've ever done it, no, 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 no. And so, you know, my mother gives me a towel every year with a different mammal. And, you know, in my world, you're either a big fish or a bacteria. And it's very easy for me. But but I want to underscore this point of even the way in which I describe what I do for a living in terms of the title, chemist, scientist, or oceanographer, which are all true, completely changes the perception of what people think of me, even before I say anything else. Perception is a very powerful tool, but can also be painful for us. For scientists, if they want to provide clarity to society. And I truly believe that it was the best deal of my life. I got a great, outstanding education, the great confidence to succeed. And it's really funny. And I think this comes, you know, I talked a lot with Randy this afternoon. And you know, when I first got out into the real world of science, I was really nervous when I was in the room with folks who were in the National Academy of Sciences or you know, big famous scientists. And then you ended up finding out that I was more than aptly prepared. And I think, and actually, it was really well prepared for my undergrad degree. You know, I got a very solid chemistry degree that when you have a good degree in chemistry for the field I'm in, you have a really solid base to fall back on. And, you know, the best part is that I'm still friends with most of my professors from undergrad. And that means a lot to me. So let me jump to my first title slide. I changed the slide title a little. You know, I've lived this kind of crazy life of, I'd almost dare say I'm almost Forrest Gump. I just seem to be wherever something's going on. And, you know, next thing you know, you're on TV or you're meeting with folks who have been sick, or you're speaking to the Prince of Monaco about science. And, you know, my world is constantly like, why am I here? And, but when you speak to all these different folks, and when you speak to the media, and when you speak to people who are making laws, or in the executive branch, or the lay public, or people who have an vested interest in their livelihood or industry, you have to appreciate them to be successful. And that is really what I'm going to talk about today, is from my experiences of having this type of Forrest Gump life, that I have some advice, thoughts, mistakes, and experiences that hopefully will be fun, and we can get on from there. So my goal tonight is to talk about this cultural gap between science and the lay public, industry, media, policymakers. I want to be exquisitely clear. It's not a cultural gap in terms of how much money you're worth, or if you're smart or not smart, or any type of elitism. I have absolutely no tolerance for elitism from my colleagues to folks who don't have PhDs or $1 million laboratories. It's a gap in which we don't understand each other's cultures. And if we did, we would be much more successful. And by not having a greater understanding of the cultures, it impinges on our capacity to transfer what we know from science. And it also directly related to a lot of different topics of interest to what can be delivered to society. And I think hope is not lost at all. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and we'll talk about that later. Whenever I give a talk, one of the first things I do is I ask myself what would be successful. Or I'll ask the inviter, whoever invites, what would you consider a successful talk? And the reason you do that is my biggest fear is I always work with a graphic artist and to give talks. And my biggest fear when I give a talk is somebody will say, if they were leaving, well, those were really cool graphics. And he spoke kind of funny. It was really funny. And then they leave. And you never talk about me again. You get in the car and you think about what you're doing for the weekend. If I do that, I failed you. You have a 4-second span of interest. You're giving me 45 minutes. You are giving me your time that's so critical on a Thursday night. And Fluffy, competing with Fluffy, I mean, thanks. I mean, this is really a big deal. Fluffy is a comedian at Freedom Hall. So anyways, so I have to deliver. because I hate missed opportunities. I was offered the opportunity to talk to you, and if I don't get you to leave this room and talk about what I said as you walk to the car, drive, talk about it in the dorms, with your spouse, your friends, tomorrow over coffee, or drinking water or whatever. And I don't care whether or not you think I was an idiot or brilliant, but I want to table stuff that begins part of your conversation. And if I don't, then I wasted your time, or maybe you saw some pretty cartoons. But I have to deliver because I hate missed opportunities. And we're going to talk about one of my best missed opportunities, if you can say that. I spent a lot of time on the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010. For 87 days, it leaked about 60,000 gallons a day. And I was essentially everywhere, every day, somewhere. Capitol Hill, on a boat, on the beach, wherever, doing a lot of media. Because there wasn't a lot of folks who study oil spills, and I had been one of them. So when they first started going, it was a lot of unknowns. And this I think he was a weatherman, became kind of the star reporter of this spill. And so one weekend I came home, and my wife said, "Can we go to the beach on Saturday?" So we go to the beach on Sunday, actually. She said Sunday. And so we pack a lunch, we go. And then about 2:30, the press officer for my institution calls, and she goes, "Good Morning America wants you to be on at the 7:10 slot." I was like, "Does that mean I have to go to New York City?" And she said, "No. They're going to do a video shoot from your lab, and Sam Champion's going to interview you while he's on the shore of the beach tonight." She goes, "It's only going to take an hour." Video shoots don't take an hour. So let me explain to you. Have you ever been in the wedding picture where you have to take the wedding pictures and it took 25 minutes to get set up? A video shoot for national TV is like 3 hours of them tweaking lights. Finally, I'm annoyed. I didn't want to be there. I was tired. I should have said no, but my ego got in the way because I had this great, oh my gosh, this is kind of adrenaline. You get on TV, it's an adrenaline kick. So my ego got in the way because A, it was Good Morning America, but also my cockiness got in the way because I knew that I was the best person to answer this guy's questions. And I was really afraid that he was going to interview an alarmist, somebody who was going to make things sound worse. And it may have been worse, but we didn't have the data at that point. So I was trying to add, my goal was to add some rational content and tell him what I knew and what I didn't know. And so I was like, you know what, I have to do this because if somebody else does it, I know what she's going to say. And I didn't want her to say it. I was actually being competitive about the person I know they were going to call if I didn't do it. But I didn't want to do it. So sure enough, a couple hours later, wasn't want to be there. Sam Champion gets on, starts talking, and he just is hammering me, trying to get me to say the Gulf of Mexico is going to be dead for 40 years. And I was like, no, we don't have the data. That's very hard to say to people when we don't have the data. We can't make those types of predictions. So finally he said, "Can we cut the video?" or something like, cut it. And then he said, "Hey, listen, I need you to say that it's really bad." And I said, "Okay, fine." I was like, "I'm not going to tell you how to blow dry your hair if you don't tell me how to do science." And about a second later, the cameras went down, and 3 hours of setup, they were going in 5 minutes. And it was one of the biggest missed opportunities in my career because I had an opportunity to speak to millions of people and add clarity while we were in the midst of a crisis. I was given that opportunity for free, and I had a great chance to add to a lot of folks who are under extreme mental stress that are living around the Gulf making a living off it, and I blew it. I totally blew it. It aggravates me to this day because it was a balance of I had better training to handle the media like this. I could have done a better job, but also I should have said no. And we all have that. We always say yes because it sounds fun or it's good, and I should have just said no. But anyways, I don't know where Sam is now. He might be next week's speaker. I'm not sure. So there's this big push to get, they call it outreach in science. Everybody's going to do outreach. And that's great. I'm a firm believer that we can do outreach. But then there's this kind of perception that every single scientist should be giving radio interviews or press interviews or doing other things. And that's just not comfortable for some folks. That's not their fault. Some people don't want to be interviewed on the radio. We shouldn't make them do that. we should make them do whatever they feel comfortable and whatever type of outreach is they're going to be most successful on. And also they're not quite primed or have the experience. And so to make that jump on the left, this fishbowl of just a bunch of scientists swimming around and wanting to jump over and try to add clarity and talk about science so that it helps society and help people make the most well-informed decisions, it's hard sometimes, but we can't make everybody do it. And if you do it, you better be ready. And you better have you better be prepared, because you and potentially could make it worse and actually confuse people more. So the stakes are pretty high. And so if you do jump, it's hard, but if not you, who? So there's a lot of stress strain, like, should I be communicating more science? But what if I make a mistake? And you make a mistake, it lasts for a long time. Now, you are not a difficult audience, okay? But speaking to diverse audiences is really hard, especially a talk like this, or any talks, because you have such a broad background of experiences and knowledge base and interests. So I am trying to give a talk to, I don't know how many people in this room, 100 or so. I'm really giving 100 different talks in theory, and I'm somehow or another trying to use words that capture every one of you. I can't give one single talk. It wouldn't be fruitful for everybody. And so that's why it's really hard, and you have to think about what's the right graphics and who you're speaking to. But it's also a lot of fun, because it is fun. It's a great challenge. And if you do it right, it's very liberating. So, but you guys are great. You're just diverse. That's okay. And one of the biggest challenges that scientists have is that we is only supposed to be said by a king or somebody who has a tapeworm, but I'm going to say we in the sense of scientists. We think of people who have a PhD and people who don't, or have a big giant lab or don't. And to put everybody in the non as one fishbowl and to think of them as the same is incredibly naive. And it doesn't work like that. And because of that, we often get into not understanding the nuances of all these different fish and what makes them special and what interests them. And so how do we tailor and speak to different folks in a manner in which that they understand, appreciate, and may use in their life, or at least like to know. So, honestly, I'm giving you intro to anthropology. This is really about, the golden rule, kindness, respect for others, and this understanding that when you meet all 100 of you, you guys all have different behaviors. You might have a different language. This is particularly a big problem in science because we're so jargon-filled and other things. You might have a completely different value system. What is success in your life? What makes you happy? What food you eat, what religion you have. These are the values. And until you have an understanding of who you're going to try to communicate science with and what their value system is, you will be at a significant disadvantage. And so they always say, oh, know your audience. It's not, knowing your audience just means, oh, I have a bunch of folks in the audience. No, knowing your audience, or what you speak to, is what do they value? What do they appreciate? What do they want to know? What's important to them? And that's the trick. And I wonder, do you have coffee with your professor or have coffee with the dean? This probably had it at some point or another. The next time you do it, ask one of the deans or department chairs what makes them happy. And I think you'll be surprised to find out what makes them happy, because you'll find out that their job's a lot harder than you think. And it's kind of enlightening. And we ask people what makes them happy. They're going to be startled a little, and what makes them feel successful in their lives. And if you do that, you'll learn a lot about them. And it's important for me because I have to know what people think their success in their job is. And so I think scientists have a lot to improve if they look upon the idea of different customs, different cultures that would have different languages and different perspectives and different experiences. So there's actually a lot of room to grow without much work to do. I have a problem now, which is, I've taken a lot of media training. I've watched a lot of things, and so when I hear National Public Radio's Science Friday show, which I like to listen to, or I hear a scientist talking on TV or the radio. I don't listen to their science anymore. I listen to how they're giving their talk. And I'm grading them on their delivery and not their content. And I'm listening to this person on, on Friday afternoon, the best science show going, and they're doing fantastic. I don't know what it's about, but I know they're doing a good job. I mean, it's, it's clean, they're giving great anecdotes and analogies, and it's really nice. And then sooner or later, they go metric. And it kills me because, a lot of, depending on what your field is, we happen to be fluent in metric, and as well as in the imperial system, foot, inches, miles, cups, and ounces, and things like that. And it drives me crazy, especially something like this example, where most scientists, if they were giving an audience, they didn't know their audience, you can almost guarantee that they're going to know what 3 miles is. But a lot of the audience might not know what 5 kilometers is. They may know what 5 kilometers is, but it's going to take them 3 seconds to do the math in their head. That's 3 seconds that you lost that person listening to you. Never make your audience work. And so this is my biggest pet peeve. Why use the metric system? I mean, you should use the metric system. And in fact, I dressed as Mr. Metric for a Halloween party once in college because I think the metric system is really cool. But you have to understand your audience, what they know. You're not dumb because you don't know the metric system. You just don't know the metric system. I can't speak French. What does it matter? So just remember that. And that's one of the scientists' biggest challenges is jargon and using things that they can avoid easily and not lose their audience. Now, this is actually part of my relationship with my wife, so it comes home a lot closer. When my wife and I, maybe we were dating, or no, it wouldn't have been dating, she wouldn't have married me. We got into watching CSI, the crime scene investigation TV show, and my wife's a mental health counselor, and mostly for kids, and she liked the show, and I liked the show. But, I liked the show, but I also was like crawling up the walls. Like they would take this, this dog fur and then have the total complete genome known after looking underneath the microscope. Or, they would fire a bullet and then tell them, how many parts per million of titanium it is by licking it or something. It was just maddening to me. You can't do that. Or they use precision when it should have been accuracy. And you just, think of the bow and arrow and all these things. And so I would constantly go on and on to my wife, this is not right. And I thought I was actually helping my wife. I thought I was giving my wife insight as to CSI. And then my wife, because she's so smart, she goes, okay, that's it. You have 1 per show. So then after that, I only had 1 per show in which I could comment on the errors in the show. And now we're married. And still married. But, here's the rub, right? I honestly wasn't trying to be a show-off. I just thought it was my responsibility to add clarity to my wife to let her know that you couldn't do that with the type of analytical chemistry that they brought to bear. She didn't want that. That wasn't part of her value system. She wanted to be entertained. She didn't want to be annoyed by her husband sounding like me, but we do this. A lot of scientists really want to help. They want to tell people something, but often it can come across as annoying or disruptive, sometimes some people just don't want to hear what you have to say. And that's not just the way it is. And sometimes you listen and you take direction. And if you listen to people and you get their feedback, you can still be an effective spouse. And I still got my 1 per show. I think the other challenge that a lot of scientists have is knowing yourself. And it's probably a lot for other folks. We think of ourselves as what we see in the mirror, M-I-R-R-O-R, silvery thing. In reality, our mirror is really like a curved fishbowl. We have what we think we are and what we are completely two different. And there's some saying that if you really want to know who you are, you ask your spouse or something similar to like that. And there's a few scientists I know right off the top who are absolutely brilliant. And they're like, they'll call me and they'll say, ABC wants to talk to me about this. I was like, you sure you want to do this? And they're like, yeah. I've written 5 papers on this. I know this stuff cold. are you really ready to talk to ABC News, National News for this? Yeah, I'm ready. I don't think you're ready. And I was like, how about we do this? Why don't you tell me you're going to call them back in 10 minutes, and you and I are going to do a dry run. Because I know what kind of questions they're going to ask. And then we're going to go through this. And then, in reality, now, I helped this guy once, but the point of the matter is that we often have a perception about what we might think we're good at or what may be bad at, and we have to have a sense of self-awareness that we might not always be exactly who we are. And that's when you start to have to take criticism and ask advice from other folks. And I've gotten a lot of advice from people that's helped out a lot. Now, scientists are not completely at fault. I missed a semicolon here. We are plagued by issues with perception, stereotyping, and expectations. I already gave you one example of perception, which is just whether I called myself a chemist, a scientist, or an oceanographer. People perceive me completely different. And stereotyping and expectations, I'm going to talk a little bit more about. I blame television. I don't watch television all the time, but for some reason I always use TV. I think television is one of the biggest mistakes for scientists because you have a 30-minute TV show, you only have 21 minutes of live show. And if you want to introduce a scientist that might be new to the show or whatever, it's very easy to go to the extremes. If you ever watch sitcoms, it's always easy to go to the extremes. It's always hard to be in the middle. And so, for a scientist, it's very easy to make them look like last pick in gym class. To make somebody look geeky with big glasses and frizzled hair and all these attributes that are easy for people to recognize. But in reality, that doesn't really happen. I mean, in fact, I have a big problem with Bill Nye, the way he dresses and acts. I actually don't think that works, but he is effective in some respects. This perception that I'm going to be the last pick in gym class is not true, with my little white lab coat, and I'm this little itty-bitty person amongst all these other big fish is not true. But that's a perception. We can get over that, it's just meeting people, talking to people. If you were, it's not that bad either. That's certainly one of the, I think the other one is actually, with the exception of a couple shows that I watch, is they always use men, which I don't think is fair either. And then I think one of the biggest challenges folks have for science is that they always think that we're going to get an answer to be 100% or 99% correct and that we've solved it. And that happens. Once in a while, you crack an egg and you get the whole story about some scientific project. But ultimately, that really doesn't happen. What we are always doing is working on this huge jigsaw puzzle that moves along incrementally. It's actually self-correcting. Think of you think you have a white horse in this little jigsaw puzzle and it ends up being a zebra or something like that. You can correct it, and that's actually pretty good. It's expandable and it's synthesizing. And there are also some parts that actually hold a lot of other pieces together. And this little piece right here actually might be a major milestone in the treatment for diabetes. We haven't solved that problem, but we've moved the ball forward. And that is a big misconception. Everybody thinks we can solve everything with 100%. And that was one of my beefs always with CSI. No, we're moving the ball forward. Sometimes it does. Science, when funded and well directed and well planned, always moves the ball forward, I think. But it's hard to explain to people. I always have this thing. You should never say as a scientist, "I wish I had more time. I need more money, and I'm not quite sure." And because that's very frustrating to people, because people want the answer. They want to Google it. And by the way, Wikipedia is maybe not so great sometimes. So if you're writing a term paper for a lot of things, I wouldn't rely on Wikipedia. You probably know that, but it's hard. It's very hard when people really want to know an answer and you have to tell them you don't know, despite the fact that you've been doing this for over 20 years. But that's life. You can work on it. So again, ultimately, this talk is all about respecting people and cultures and their value system. Again, I'm going to go back to TV. I'm not sure how many of you folks know Anthony Bourdain. I'm not sure if you ever watched his TV shows. He was originally a chef, then he wrote the book Kitchen Confidential, and then he got himself famous. And at the end, before he passed away, He had some really great television shows where he traveled around the world and he ate food with people from different backgrounds and different lifestyles and all those different aspects of that umbrella of cultures. And he was fantastic. I think he was genuinely sincere, and he would be happily sitting around a fire, you know, eating with a wooden spoon on some dish that was made out of some, you know, some old piece of metal, and he was happy, and he was really interested in the culture. He didn't judge those people because they didn't have a Viking stove or you know, copper pans or anything like that. He judged them because he didn't even judge them. He enjoyed them. And you know, go and watch some of his shows. Don't watch the show for the content. Watch the show about how he treated and respected people and was interested in them. And I think it made him better for the next show as well, because he made a grand effort, I think, and sincerely to understand people. And if you do that, you'll be much more successful. Again, here we are again at our cultures, and this is the challenge. If we want to provide clarity, and if folks want to know more about science, we have to just have the understanding that we have a completely often different value system. And this value system and these cultures and all these different folks that might represent those fishbowl are all interconnected. And in this case, I go around trying to make the best figure. Right now we're on the bicycle. But especially when you have a crisis, whether it's an oil spill or a hurricane or a tsunami, you know, you suddenly have the media driving this bicycle of different parts that are all now moving. And now more than ever, the social media is really spinning these gears. And so how do you effectively get, in this case it was academia or science, into the mainstream so they can inform industry and government and the public and non-government organizations, so that after a hurricane or whatever, that the best thing that's going to happen, that we can make less people hurt, less people suffering. And that's the challenge. The problem often is that we don't ride our bike that often. And so these types of groups of folks only materialize when a crisis happens. And I call that exchanging business cards at a crisis. And my point is that if you know that you're going to work with somebody at your job if something goes sideways, if you know that you're going to deal with somebody eventually due to their job and your job, and they're relatively local, why aren't you calling up and having coffee with them? You don't want to know and learn about somebody during a crisis. People behave differently during crises. There's different politics get into play very, very quickly. So the best time is either to do practice runs on whatever you're doing, but the best time is if you know someday you're going to meet somebody, and this is all walks of life and many, many different places. If you think it's going to be a hard time or a little bit tough, have coffee with them. I am a firm believer that coffee and cookies and any other food, meeting with people, is the best way to learn about them, find out what's important to them, what their job really is, what they consider a success, and then once you know that, you'll have a much better outcome whenever these crises happen, and maybe less people will suffer. Media's got a problem right now in many respects. There are outstanding science journalists and mainstream journalists, and there are also a lot of journalists who aren't very strong. And unfortunately, a lot of times, there's a saying, if it bleeds, it leads, which is the most horrific story gets the headline. And this is maddening to the scientific community. It's even more maddening when they get interviewed about a paper that they wrote and it gets taken out of context and spin a different way. And that's just maddening to folks. So, the media is often at fault as well. I mean, they're trying their best. I tend to think they're trying their best. But they have different goals. And let's talk about I think I spelled legislation wrong. I know I did. That's okay. I just put this up as an example. I want you to appreciate and you could argue with me on all these points. But for an academic, first, you go to grad school, you postdoc, you got to be, and finally you might get tenure. That takes about a decade, maybe more. To get elected, it might take some time, but then once you're elected, you have a 2 or a 4 or 6 year tenure. The media works on time scales of seconds to hours now. So the time scales on how Everests work are completely different. Asking a scientist to make a measurement that they usually do in a month during a crisis is very hard. It's very hard for a scientist to say, I'm 70% sure that we're going to run out of water because of this. They don't like 70%. Scientists want 90%. But if you're a crisis response unit, I'll take 70 over nothing, no data. And these are the challenges. What is our goals? What do we consider success? Success for me is funding, and watching, the students who work with me also being successful. Successful for a legislator might be to be reelected. The media might be to sell ads. You can disagree on all these points. The point of the matter is that we have different time scales for success and how much time we have for success, how long it takes for success, and what is expected. One of the things that's not up here, because it's actually very hard to visualize, is making a mistake. You write one really bad paper and it gets published, that'll stick onto you for a while, a good while. A legislator, I'm not quite sure what mistake and how long the memory is, but on the flip side, even if the New York Times makes a mistake in their article, it gets corrected in very small font and moved on. And so the memory effect and the forgiveness effect is also very different. So what is science, what I think science can provide is telling people what do we know, what isn't correct, what is unknown, what has changed, or what's changing, which is a big deal right now because a lot of things we have a lot of moving parts going on right now in society and in the earth, and so we might actually have a lot of things are changing when we're trying to measure something that we would like it to be static. We're making a measurement and it's moving over, so that's very hard. What's under debate, which is a very important point. Scientists should always explain to folks, this is what we know, this is what we don't know. This is a point that's still unknown, and there's a lot of scientists who think this, and some scientists think that. And I think scientists are best when we do it. We do our science passionately, but we have to present it dispassionately. We can't get mad. Like you can't let this. If you're in a disaster area, you can't be mad that the governor didn't call a disaster area because a lot of people should have left the state and got into safer ground, and the governor didn't. You can't worry about the cause. You just have to worry about what you know as a scientist and how you can do it. You can't provide a commentary. But here's the line, and this is the line that we all live with, especially in environmental science, is in my world, you're either an environmental scientist, and that's a person who says, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, this is what's changing, what's on the debate, things like that. Then there's an environmentalist who may have a PhD, who may actually still be a practicing scientist, but I think that they have a platform and they have a desire to get a point moved across because that's what they believe in. And those folks I consider environmentalists. Nothing wrong with being an environmentalist, but often you have to be very careful, especially in the media, when they interview somebody with Dr. So-and-so, often those folks have an agenda. My agenda is to add science clarity. I don't care which way it goes. Some folks from the environmentalist world, they have an agenda, and it's fine for them to do that, but you have to recognize those two different sides. I'm going to give you one example. Sylvia Earle is a very famous oceanographer, I guess, called the Queen of the Deep. She's had a very successful career and doesn't know jack about oil spills, nothing. Anyways, during this Deepwater Horizon oil spill, her and a lot of other folks were making statements that were not true. Or, there was no basis. There was no data to support that. And, in part because there was a knowledge gap. The media wanted something, and the experts were saying, well, we're not quite sure yet how this is going to play out. And so you create this vacuum, and then you have folks like Sylvia doing this. And what Sylvia doesn't know is that she might, and I'm reaching really far out, so give me a lot of latitude, she might have promoted more mental health problems, possibly spousal abuse. The amount of spousal abuse that occurred after the Deepwater Horizon, when you tell a family that relies on the fish, one to catch the fish and one to process the fish, and they're told they can't fish, It's a very, very stressful moment. So the last thing you need to hear is doom and gloom when it's not founded. And she did that. And I was very mad with her. And I very much told her that too. But you have to be aware of this. And it's unfortunate that sometimes that you can make a big mistake and mistakes can be carried through when there is agenda at play. And I don't want to have an agenda. My agenda is just to do good science and do a good job explaining it. So there's some easy first steps. And we're going to look at ONeill, who was a former Speaker of the House from Massachusetts. And he's associated with this line that says all politics are local. I have the same viewpoint about how you engage and start to learn about other cultures is to think locally. And I'm going to show you a small schematic of my neighborhood. Now this is an unusual place, but you're in a college town, so there should be analogs that in this relatively small place you have a coffee obsession and pie in the sky, two places that have coffee and muffins. You can speak to the Coast Guard, the Environmental Police, the United States Geological Survey, NOAA up on the top left, who decides on fish counts. The Coalition for Buzzards Bay is a non-government organization that overlooks the nearby bay. WCAI has one of the best science reporters. It's an NPR station. Then there's a whole variety of other research centers, and you have residents. So my advice to you as a scientist is, if you think someday you might deal with somebody or end up having the Coast Guard might ask you a question or an analog, why don't you go meet them first? Or on the flip side, perhaps you're very interested in some type of science. There's nothing stopping you. You don't have to, this is not the only way to learn about interesting science if you want to know. Email them. Say, hey, I read about your work and I don't have a PhD, but is there ever a chance I could have coffee and you could explain this to me? I think you'd be very surprised on the response. If somebody did that to me, I'd say fine. Some people might say no, but I think that we don't, all of us, there's nothing stopping us from making relationships, or not even making relationships, but having an understanding. And I'm a firm believer of coffee and anything else that allows people to relax. And you get to see these people in a place that is not when there's a thumb underneath their head. And especially during these crises, that I learned a lot about what is being taught here in terms of medical crises. So I don't have much time, so I'm going to give you an offer. I have a lot of mistakes and funny stories to tell, and I could do them, but I'm going to give you two options. I'm going to either tell you she washed my face, or when do I get to feed my family? You get to pick. Number one. It's my favorite. So, all right, she washed my face. 2003, April 26th. It was an oil spill, actually in Buzzards Bay, not too far from where I lived. And it was on a Sunday night that the spill occurred on the 25th. On the 26th, it smelled really bad locally, and the extent of the oiling and the state of this barge that ran aground was really well unknown. And so my colleague and I have a gear bag, and then I have sampling bags. I have a lot of stuff. So if I had to go to a spill, I have it there, and I have stuff in different places as well. If I had to. So anyways, I got my bag, and then we found a boat, which is not hard in Woods Hole. And we went and started to survey it and collect samples, and it was a long 7 or 8 hours. And we pull up to the dock, and every possible media outlet that was both local, national, was there. And I looked terrible. As we were tying up, somebody was saying, this is the person you want to talk to. There was 5 people on the boat, but I was the one that was being singled. I was the one who looked the worst. I had stuff on my face and salt, and my hair was just gross, and I was a deer in the headlights. I was tired, and I was not prepared to speak to this group, and I would have bombed. And then out of nowhere, this reporter for one of the Boston television stations and her cameraman grabbed me by the wrist, and they took me away. And the reporter says, you're not ready to give an interview. She goes, let's go in the van. So we get in the van, the reporter and the weatherman, she washed my face. She even gave me some makeup. The other guys gave me water. I was eating Oreo cookies. I sat there and shot the bull with them for 5 or 6 minutes. I don't know how long it was. And then she said, okay, you're ready. You can go out there. And I went out and I gave I gave a mini press conference. I never would have given that good of a press conference. I'm not even sure if I would have even done it. I might have been too scared. I don't know what would have happened, but this sense of kindness from a completely different culture, who clearly saw that I was, in some type of duress, and helped me, was just an amazing moment. And it reminds you that, obviously the media sometimes frustrates you, but they're good people too. I mean, yeah, there's always some bad folk, but I don't tend to think like that. And so the story is that all these other customs, they're fine folk. Don't think any less of them. And in my case, this incredible kind gesture helped me give a better presentation and gave more content to this very hungry press. And so kindness goes a long way. I don't want to sound like a bumper sticker, but it's very true. If you had asked about, I just want to feed your family, you would have gotten that figure. It's not as good of a story. So I'm just going to tie up. We will have greater success as science can get brought more into clarity now more than ever. I think if we just have a better understanding of, first we appreciate the different cultures, and figure out what is done in science or in medical world that can help society in a way that's meaningful. It would be a shame that some really good information never gets conveyed for whatever reason. And we can do a better job and do that. So at the end of the day, just be nice to people and the world will be a lot better. I know that's really kind of catchy, but it's really true from what I've seen. And I've seen it in a lot of bad places and where there's, things are bad, and nice really floats. So thank you for this talk. And Natalie is my graphic artist who made this, and she's fantastic. So thank you.
Time for a few questions?
Oh, God, yeah. Bring it on. Yeah, sure.
Universal signal, raise your hand.
Yeah, please.
I think most people do that. About raising the hand.
Yes, I was just curious as to, as far as global warming, how big of an issue is that right now, and what's the future with that?
Oh, well, you just jumped right to the chase there, didn't you? There's a really good article in the New York Times about the guy who said we shouldn't use global warming and we should use climate change. I think it's very safe to say that our oceans and the Earth is warming due to the increased amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. I think that's extremely well clear and there's deleterious effects that we're starting to see through. So yes, the climate is getting warmer, and there are other effects that are trickling down. Now, with that said, there is uncertainty, and I wish scientists would do a better job. I feel absolutely confident that we're undergoing climate change due to increased amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's very true. It's a greenhouse effect. It happens in greenhouses. The difference is what is going to happen in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And that's where there is some differences of opinion. Now, there are folks who like to merge both of those points together, and they shouldn't be. The first part is, do we have a problem? Yes. Can we do much to solve it? Not clear. Do we have an understanding of what the outcome is? Well, yes, we do. There are estimates about what's going to be in 20, 40, 60, 80 years. Will Mother Nature surprise us and trees start growing faster and actually help draw down the CO2? I'm not quite sure. But then there's another problem as well when we try to spin out what's going to happen in 20 or 30 years. Can anybody tell me the temperature of this room? Now, I need a degree. I want 3 people to give me a temperature. 70, I hear 70. 68. Awesome, thank you guys. You just gave me a 3 degree difference in Fahrenheit, and I can't do the conversion in my head right now. When you look at these models, they talk about differences in 1 to 2 and 3 degrees and how that's going to change the climate. So it's very hard sometimes to explain to people that a 2 or 3 degree shift is going to change our climate that much, when even right now we can't even get a good handle on what our temperature we're feeling. So we're going to have to start communicating what those outcomes are going to be. I feel very comfortable that our Earth is changing. What the outcome's going to be, there's some good data, there's some good predictive models, but there's more uncertainty about what's going to happen than what is happening.
Do you have any rules of thumb for communicating very complex ideas? Like, do you break them down into 2, 3 simple points, or is there anything like that that you use for complicated questions or answers?
Well, it depends. The best way is if you know it's coming. And this is what a lot of scientists, you know, the French said all generalizations are false, even this one. And it's really true. But if you know that you're going to be charged and somebody's going to ask you that question, then you have the time to experiment. And you can do it in front of the mirror or with your family and talk about it. And that's what I would do. You know, I constantly am trying to figure out a different way. You know, I'm studying plastics in the ocean, and I'm trying to talk about how plastics are different. And I came up with this idea to try to explain to people that every piece of plastic in the ocean is different. It's like a snowflake. And so we can't think about them as one single entity. And so that's something that I've been thinking about because I've been trying to explain how complex the plastic in the ocean problem is. So I'm constantly thinking about how to drill down. It's easier when you know the question's coming. It's a lot harder when somebody out of the blue says, can you explain to me whether or not climate change is happening? And I didn't really prepare myself for that, although I did okay. But Exhibit A. Mm-hmm. I didn't say IPCC, but I shouldn't have said IPCC because I shouldn't use an acronym. But no, it's a lot easier when you know it's coming. If not, you know, you read their body language. And sometimes you tease them. You say something and then you let them parrot you, and then that's usually the better way. So you give them a teaser, just a little bit of something like, you know, have you ever done this? And then you can gauge what their response is, and then you can tailor to them. So sometimes you have to just give a simple probe, like a tap. And then what they tap back is going to be how you tailor, and then how they tap back. So sometimes you have to tailor it to every person. But you'll get a very good vibe if you just get the right beginning question, and then you riff off it. Yeah.
So what sort of training do you provide the students that you're working with in
Public and conveying their results to media or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Class with a science journalist at my university. It's the only class I teach. And it's called Talking to Everybody Else. And we have a couple classes that are rules about jargon and other things. And then for the rest of the class, we bring in all those different pieces in the cultural umbrella. And we have these people talk about their lives, and then the students get to interact. And at the end of the semester, we charge them to write kind of a popular piece that might be 700 words, a text that might get published, or a letter to the editor, or an opinion pieces. I'll tell you, letter to the editors, if you're a scientist and you want to get a point across clearly, every editorial page editor would love to get a letter to the editor from a scientist if it's done well and clear and fair. But yeah, that's the class I teach is we make a very strong effort to bring in different practitioners to give life experiences and then kind of riff off them throughout the class. And it's a fantastically fun class. And you know what the best part is? The other PhD students' advisors were like, you know, I thought this was going to be a waste of time, but you know what? My student's a better writer now from a technical perspective. And that's pretty cool. So.
It sounds like you've done a lot of world traveling. I was wondering what you would say your best experience was in terms of teaching you the most.
Oh. Okay. I don't want to, I keep falling back on Deepwater Horizon. I have much more diverse storytelling. The day, let's say it's a Tuesday, on a Monday, I was at the headquarters for the oil spill response, and I was with the lead admiral who was in charge of the whole response. And they asked me to, so I was going in and out and helping what they call the Unified Command. And they said, well, we're going to brief the director of the FDA tomorrow. This was actually after the well had stopped, but there was still oil out there. And so they said, can you help us brief the FDA director? She's flying down. And so I went down, and I was part of the briefing team that the FDA director wanted to know, and things like that. And they ended up telling us that most of the fisheries had reopened, and where everything was going and how safe the fish were, even after, like, this was about 2 months after things had settled down, but there still was a little oil in some places. So I had just heard from the FDA scientists and the FDA director. I was in the high-level discussion about food safety for fish on let's say a Monday. On a Tuesday, I decided to go do some field work in, I might say, Alabama. And I sat down in this little cafe, and somebody said, oh, this guy who's behind the counter, hey, you don't have any fish on the menu. They said fish is fine. And he goes, I'm not going to be serving any sides of cancer to any of my customers. So there I am, sitting there in Alabama, having just been briefed by the FDA director and all these people about food safety. And do I engage? Do I engage with this small town, Alabama? No, you guys aren't small town. What do I do? Do I engage? I didn't. Because I didn't think that I was going to make a difference. And in some respects, I didn't think that, the stakes, I don't think I would have changed that person's mind. And so it wasn't worth the effort. But I think about it a lot. Like, how would have I said? How do you say, oh, I'm an ambulance chasing oil spill scientist, carpetbagger coming down to try to save your little world, and I know more than you, and the fish is fine, to a guy who's been serving the same customers for years? I couldn't pull it off. I did the math in my head, and I said, I'm going to keep my mouth shut and go. So I didn't have clarity that day, because I knew I wouldn't win or succeed. So that's one of my favorite ones, because I actually showed some good judgment, I think. Sorry if that's a long answer.
So I know
I don't see my speech. Oh, hi. That's okay. No, that's fine. Yeah.
I know you talked about your research with plastic in the oceans and the use of the side business.
Yes.
With algae cosmetics. I'm curious about, I've done some research over the summer,
Yeah.
very basic with algae, about algae that can metabolize microparticles of plastic. I don't know how much you
Oh, yeah.
about it, or just
No, I'm not quite sure about algae, but every year when they give out the Nobel Prize for chemistry, it really should go to microbes. There's no finer chemist in the world than a microbe or a bacteria. So, and I think they have the great capacity to eat plastic, there's no doubt. The problem is that asking microbes to do a chore, to clean up something, is like asking a teenager to do a chore. And you tell them to clean the garage, they might do it, but they might not finish it. They might do only the easy things, or they may do a really terrible job, or they might not do it at all. And that's what happens with contaminants. With microbes. A lot of times people will say, oh, the microbes will come in and will clean it all up. They won't. They work on their own terms. And most often, you can think of oil or plastic as like a food buffet. So you're a microbe. You have all these opportunities of food you might want to eat to make a living in the ocean. The problem with plastics is plastics is about the most unattractive, least tasteful, hardest to chew. It's like my mother cooking steak. My mother's steak, you could put laces on it and walk around town. It's so hard and hard to chew. And that's the problem with plastics. They were made, the reason why plastics exist in the environment so long was they were made to last that long. It's nobody's fault. There should be no surprise whatsoever that plastics haven't biodegraded as much as we think. They may, but you can't tell a bacteria what to do in the ocean. They don't like direction. They're only going to eat plastic if there's nothing else to eat, because I would say that's the toughest thing to eat currently in the ocean. They're not going to do it. They'll do it if they want to, but they won't do it on direction. I wouldn't rely on a bacteria any day of the week. I wouldn't, even though they have great power. Some Spider-Man quote. Don't rely on them. When they do something, it's great, but don't rely on them. Go ahead.
Hi there.
I'm missing somebody.
Thank you for coming to speak with us.
Oh, hi, how are you? Yeah.
Hey, so I was wondering, what are some easily accessible changes that like your everyday person could do to reduce oil and plastic usage?
Why I think recycling is, by far the beginning of, to me, recycling is a no-brainer in that respect. And then, sustainability and using the same product over again. I want to be clear, plastics save lives. Oil saves lives. DDT saved 1 billion lives. When the Italian historian from 1900 to 1950 wrote that history, the most important thing that happened in Italy from 1900 to 1950 was DDT. It wasn't the world wars. DDT saved 1 billion lives at least. The guy who invented, well, he didn't invent it, but identified its superpowers as a pesticide won the Nobel Prize in Medicine or Physiology within 10 years, which is unbelievable. So sometimes we have to put this in the context of it's not that DDT is bad or plastics are bad. What's not good is that we don't have an understanding about how they behave and how do we move forward in a way that we understand these products so that they don't become a problem. So how do we get a lot wiser? And so I don't think plastics are going to get out of our everyday lives. But we may avoid making certain plastics that have the greatest capacity to live the longest in a place where they most likely might be found in the ocean. So I think we want to be a lot more strategic about what products are being used in the manner in which they are being used. But obviously using less of anything is a good thing. And I'm not an apologist for plastics or anything like that. I just think that we have to recognize it's not the enemy. We just have to be smarter and wiser. We didn't know about how bad DDT was because we thought it was a miracle drug. We thought it was this fantastic thing. We used it like duct tape or something else. We didn't have an appreciation for its physical and chemical properties and its toxicological properties. It wasn't my grandfather's fault that he sprayed DDT. He didn't have the knowledge.
All right, well, another round of applause.
Thank you.
Well, Chris, in the best Southern tradition,
Oh.
we have a couple of gifts for you.
Oh, thank
Party
you.
Gifts, we call them.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Maybe something that's too large to fit in your
Awesome.
baggage.
Yes.
And then, more importantly, the status of honorary
Oh,
professor
nice.
in our College of Public Health.
Oh, cool.
So thank you.
Oh, that's great. Nice. At my work, I'm a senior scientist, but now I'm a professor. That's really cool. So awesome. Thank you.
Not a lot of professors get
If I could, can I change it to honorable? And it'd be awesome.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. You're a great audience. I really appreciate it. And,
So the next and last Leading Voices for this semester will be October 26th. Result from Project Drawdown. We're talking about climate solutions as health solutions. If you're not aware of that book, it's really an interesting approach to trying to quantify what any individual action might do to impact the climate. So that's a positive thing. You may notice that there's an opportunity here if you have ideas for speakers or suggestions. Many of you have done that in the past. If you also would like to make a donation to support this lecture series, we've done it for the last 13 years, and we appreciate your support. More importantly, I really hope to see you on October 22nd. And finally, Chris, thank you again for an outstanding presentation. Good night.